Welcome to Energy Insights. Today we're speaking with Sunil Dahiya, an analyst at the South Asia branch of the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air. We talk about many topics that revolved around the upcoming Indian election and where energy fits into that picture, including an overview of India's renewable energy capacity right now, how much Modi's BJP government can be credited with spurring clean energy growth, the dangers of India simultaneously walking down two energy pathways at the same time with renewables and coal, the development opportunities for renewables in the future, and other topics. In the past, Sunil has been an expert and voice in the implementation of emissions standards for coal power plants in India on issues that range from research, policy support, and coalition development, which ultimately contributed to India's first national clean air program. Sunil's also authored multiple reports and research papers on energy and air pollution issues. It was great to have Sunil on the show, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. So we're here with Sunil Dahiya. Sunil, thank you so much for coming on Energy Insights. Great to have you on here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure having a conversation with you.
So before we get started, Sunil, I'm wondering if you can tell listeners a little bit about who you are, where you work, and maybe any other kind of relevant backgrounds to your career that you think are important.
I'm Sunil Dahiya. Basically, look after. So I work with Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air. It's a global research think tank which looks at energy and air pollution trends globally in key geographies wherever there are high air pollution levels, or geographies which are developing fast, and there is a lot of coal usage still happening, but these are also the geographies which are transitioning away, or at least attempting to transition away, and that's where I think a lot of our staff is based out of South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and China. We do have a presence, and we work in Europe as well. So that's about the group work. We basically track energy, air pollution trends, look at their health impacts on the communities living nearby these energy intensive industries, as well as generally in any other polluted geographies. So that's what we do as a group. I look after the group's work in South Asia, where it's known as a global air pollution hotspot, and also India, which is one of the fastest growing economy and still has a lot of coal usage. So I look after that geography, and it goes without saying that a lot of my time, apart from working a little bit on Pakistan and Bangladesh, it's spent on looking at energy and air pollution trends in India.
Yeah, so Sunil, I'd really like to pick your brain on a few air pollution questions a bit later, but now in this episode, I really wanted to talk to you about, I guess, energy, which is also related to air pollution, if it's coming from fossil fuels, for example. But I wanted to also drill into the upcoming Indian election, and I guess how that is tying into India's energy transition and its attempts to move away from fossil fuels. So I think a good place to start right now is looking at, I guess, India's current energy transition. And in the past couple of years, it's been pretty highly regarded as doing a fairly good job in global standards, especially because in Asia as well. So I'm just wondering how things are looking overall for the country, and has Modi's BJP government done a good job at kind of incentivizing clean energy over the period that it's been in power for?
So if you basically talk about how the energy trends have been kind of shaping up in India, I definitely agree with you that over last few years, India, it's seen as the champion on the RE front along with China, because and the only distinction between China and India is that the scale at which the RE deployment is happening, it's very, very different in India and China, because China has huge power requirement and huge base, whereas India is much lower than that. But if you look at the RE installed capacity, we were somewhere around 25-30 gigawatt 10 years back. And now that capacity, whenever I say RE, that's a disclaimer that I'll not be including large hydro in that, but Indian government as well as globally at many places, a lot of governments have started including large hydro under RE. So whenever I say RE, it will be excluding that for now. So we have grown from 25-30 gigawatt in 10 years back to about 135 or 140 gigawatt right now. That means the RE capacity has grown 7-folds in last 1 decade, and that's a huge growth. But when we look at this number, the base itself was relatively small. What we have also done is that most of this growth has come from solar energy rather than wind energy, which has grown a little bit, but not at the pace at which solar energy has grown. Like, for example, solar energy, we were only about 4 gigawatt or 5 gigawatt 10 years back, and right now we are at around 80. So that's a phenomenal growth. And it's because of those high rate of installations that India is seen as one of the prominent voices on RE front. But if you look at what India aspired to do in the last 5 to 7 years, it was in 2017 when we aspired to install 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022. And obviously, we are much lower than that. Even today, we are in 2024. So even though we did good work in scaling up RE, we couldn't even meet the targets which we set for ourselves. And now the same kind of issue seems to be bothering the Indian government as well as the general public, that the next target which we have is for 2030, and we are aspiring to have 500 gigawatt of renewable energy right now. And that 500 includes about 50 gigawatt of hydro. So if we exclude that 450 gigawatt of RE from the existing level of 130, 140 gigawatt, that means we still have to install 300 gigawatt of renewable energy, and that would translate into at least 50 gigawatt installations every year starting from today. And if we compare that to how we have been doing last year or last couple of years, the average rate of installation has been around 15 gigawatt, and that's where the challenge lies.
How much has that growth in the past couple of years been attributable to Modi's BJP government, or was all this growth put in before BJP came into power? Has he been incentivizing this quite a lot? Has he been pushing this growth in renewables quite significantly?
So if we look, as I mentioned, that this growth from 25-30 gigawatt to 135 is in last 10 years, and it's the same BJP government which has been in power. So we can say that most of this growth has happened during their tenure, and there is definitely a big push on large scale renewables and particularly solar, and that's why the solar capacity has grown from nearly 4 gigawatt to about 80 gigawatt right now. So there has definitely been steps taken by the existing government in terms of scaling renewable energy. But what we also need to look at, whenever a technology is in nascent stages, its large scale deployment as well as the economic costs are not in favor of large scale. Not in favor of real fast expansion, and that's where I think the global community, if you look at not just India but everywhere else, most of the countries have shown significant growth similar to India over last 10 years. So yes, the existing governments in any region play a major role in shaping up how the electric sector is transitioning. But it's also driven by the global research, the falling prices of renewable storage, and also the restrained or constraining space for coal in the larger global politics. So all those factors, global factors, some of the local air pollution factors, as well as the existing government taking certain steps to ensure that we move in that direction where the world is moving and has to move, has definitely played a role.
So, I mean, we've got the Indian election coming up pretty soon, and right now it's been almost widely accepted that BJP will win again. I mean, there is always the off chance that they may not win, but many people are saying that they are probably the favorites at this moment in time. So I'm just wondering, what kind of energy policies are they putting forth now? Now, you mentioned that they've upped their ambition on, these growth targets, but are they looking at any other avenues? Like I know India has been talking a lot about hydrogen, for example, and driving up that kind of domestic production of it. Are there other things going on with what the government right now is saying that they will do if they win another election?
Obviously, whenever a national party contests the election, they will definitely come up with some manifesto promises which they intend to fulfill in the next term if they get elected. But what also happens is, more particularly with regions where the existing parties are favorites to win the election, is the existing policy also supports whatever we do after. And that's where I think what you mentioned, there have been a large push on green hydrogen in India, and that's by this government. And there, I definitely see that there will be much more increasing investments in coming years, and it's irrespective. So BJP government or party has definitely mentioned that in their manifesto that there will be emphasis on green hydrogen. The same has also been mentioned by the opposition parties. What we also see that when we talk about renewable energy, if we go back to 2017, when we aspired 175 gigawatt RE target, we also said that 30 gigawatt out of that will come from rooftop solar, but till now that wasn't really picking up well. Right now we are at around 20 odd gigawatts, and just few months back there have been new policy announcements or updates wherein there is an increasing focus on rooftop solar, which means that the consumption center, the houses or households which consumes the electricity will be generated from their rooftops, which will definitely enhance a little bit of energy security at a very local level, but at the same time also do away with the transmission losses, because India is still a country which has about 15% transmission losses, meaning if I'm consuming 115 units or 100 units, there are 115 units generated somewhere and transmitted. So I definitely see a lot of emphasis in the manifestos by both the BJP as well as the Congress and the opposition parties, where they have been very categorically mentioning that there will be very large focus on green hydrogen. There will be large focus on decentralized renewable energy. BJP mentions it as through rooftop solar policy, whereas Congress mentions it as that the local governance units, the panchayats and municipal corporations will be encouraged to have their own smaller grids which are running on renewable energy. So both are saying nearly the same kind of thing, but a bit more technicalities. And also we have seen that there is a larger conversation happening wherein the greening of steel using hydrogen, and even maybe by increasing the usage of scrap, increasing the electrification of these units rather than them being based on captive coal-based power plants. So these are all policies which have been updated in last few years, and that's the trajectory which we are following, and these also find places in the manifesto of the leading political parties.
So if we zoom in a little bit now, all of these numbers and all of these policies have, real effects on everyday people's lives. So I'm just wondering what all of these kind of promises mean for not just people in urban areas, but also in rural areas too. Do you expect to see electricity become more widespread? Is it expected to become cheaper, or do you think there might be any troubles in this transition for everyday people?
Thanks for asking this question. This is what really matters for you, me, and everybody else on the street, and I think we should definitely look it through this lens. And this also brings me to the other component of energy or energy transition. When we say it, we have been talking about renewable energy, but renewable energy, one, is meeting the increasing demand, but if we have to move on a transition pathway, it has to start eating up some space used by fossil fuels and coal in case of India, because that's the major. energy source. And that's where I think I would like to mention that even though India is doing great on renewable energy front, and we also showed earlier signs of kind of restraining coal in our energy mix in years preceding 2023, but that kind of trajectory seems to be changing over last year and a half. And why I say so is because India's the agency which regulates the power generation, Central Electricity Authority and Ministry of Power, they at multiple times over last 5 years have said that India does not need any new coal-based power plants, and apart from the ones which were in advanced stages of construction, and if we do that, it might lead to stranded assets, wastage of public money in building those resources. And that was not an absurd argument. That was based on kind of assessment they had done, as well as earlier cases where we have seen such stranded assets being created. If you go 15 years back, around 2008 to 2012, there was a similar wave going on, which started last year again in India, wherein the demand projections were put very high, and that would mean that if the demand projections are high, you need to meet that demand, and that led to miscalculation of how much of installed capacity we will need, and also kind of creating an environment for the investors to kind of easily come up with a plan to establish a coal-based power plants, and you'll also be facilitated by the government to make it easy for you to go ahead with establishing those power plants. But obviously, because of various issues, a lot of those power plants didn't come up. But even despite that, what that push around 2008 to 12 led to was a creation of a surplus energy generation capacity, whereas the demand didn't grow much, but the installed capacity grew at a much faster rate. That led to suboptimal utilization of those plants, which means that if a plant which could have generated 100 units is now generating 55 units, and you have already invested your capital in it, which means the cost of electricity will go up for the end consumer. And that also meant, even then, there is a finite demand, and a lot of power plants were not able to find any buyers. They were not supplying electricity. They couldn't operate. And that led to some other power plants which were in early stages or mid stages of construction to abandon their construction, to kind of declare bankruptcy and run away. And there was about 40 gigawatt of such capacity, which right now, like that capacity is still haunting us. We are still resolving them, and there is a significant capacity which is still not resolved. There have been cases where a 10,000 crore INR plant had been resolved by the government because it was bankrupt. The company was bankrupt, and then that plant had to be resold to somebody else because the lenders were asking for money. And what that led to is lenders agreeing to very heavy haircuts. A 10,000 crore power plant being resold at 4,000 crore. And this 6,000 crore rupee loss is not borne by the company which was establishing it. It's borne by the lenders, the banks, the financing institutions. And most of these financing institutions were either Indian government subsidiaries or the public sector banks, which ultimately means that it was public money which has been wasted on these resources. And now what started happening after the initial signs of India moving away from coal or not needing any new coal-based power plants, last year we have seen that the new proposals coming up for establishing coal-based power plants are increasing. There have been more and more coal mines which are being auctioned, and estimates so that the existing coal mining capacity is more than sufficient to even meet 2030 demand. The existing coal-based installed capacity, along with the plants which are in advanced stages of construction, are sufficient to meet 2030 demand if you install renewable energy. And that means that whatever we are proposing right now either will not be built and will be left halfway the way it was done earlier, or it will be built and then it won't find any buyers for electricity, or if it finds buyers for electricity, the overall the sectors operation level or power load factor will come down, which will increase the cost of coal-based electricity. And because 82% of India's electricity right now generated from coal, that will increase the overall cost of coal, even though there is renewable energy coming in, which is very cost competitive, and at least during the day, it's even cheaper than coal-based electricity. Obviously, there is a little bit of competition going on, wherein if all the external costs, pollution cost, the climate change damage, and all those and the ecosystem loss costs are included in coal's cost, it will be much expensive than the renewable energy and storage. But right now, RE plus storage, it's slightly higher than cost of coal. But the more and more renewable energy being integrated into the system, and also that if RE follows the trajectory of falling prices or reducing prices of RE installations, the way it has done in last 5 to 10 years, RE is going to be cheaper. RE plus storage also is going to be cheaper than coal in next few years. And that's where I think RE will definitely reduce the burden of electricity prices on general public. But if India keeps working on both the paths of RE and coal, the overall system cost might not come down, and that's where I think it needs to be strategically decided, and very clear signals should be sent out by the regulator, by the government, saying that over the longer horizon, that if we have 100 rupees, most of it or all of it should be invested in the technology of future, and rather than creating possible stranded assets few years down the line. And that's where answering this question of whether the electricity cost will be cheaper for consumer in future or expensive is a bit complicated right now, because there are no signals, no very clear signals of choosing just one path by the government, and working on both, it's complicating it, and that leads to higher system costs.
It reminds me actually, it's interesting that you say this, because it reminds me of actually what India's Environment Minister Bhupender Yadav has been pretty vocal about over the past couple of years, about using coal as a way to develop the country. Now, he's been saying this for a long time in many different places. So I'm just wondering, like, keep bearing in mind what you have just said about with renewables, for example, and that they have the ability, their costs are coming down, they're getting very competitive with coal in India, but at the same time, you still have big figures like Bhupender Yadav mentioning that coal is he's basically banking on the fact that coal is going to help India become more developed. How do you view that? Do you see for me, it just, there's two different stories going on here. So I'm just wondering how you view Environment Minister Yadav's opinions.
So that's, I agree with you. That's definitely true that we have been saying two different things and two different platforms or two different times, because we are doing fairly decent on RE and we aspire to do even more. So yes, the RE has the potential, is the technology of future, and it's the government itself which has these ambitions, and that's a pathway we are working on. So nobody can deny that India don't want to work on the RE pathway. Yes, we are. But at the same time, this is also true that there have been statements and even signals by the government and even the industry following those signals. We have started that being translated into new proposals coming up for new coal-based power plants. And that's where I said the complexity lies, and that's what can pull down India on the energy transition pathway. We have seen these statements from ministers, power minister, the environment minister, that we need more coal. But as I mentioned, if we install the RE and meet our 2030 targets, the coal consumption will peak around 27, 28. And if the consumption is peaking, that means that you don't need to burn more and more coal. That means you don't need more and more coal-based plants. And any plant which you are coming up with a proposal of right now will not be built in next 5 years. So even if it gives some electricity, it will be towards the end of the decade where you don't need to grow your coal consumption. What also is also very interesting is that just last week there was a court case going where wind farms were coming up, and there was a bit of controversy around Great Indian Bustard habitat being impacted by that, and there the power ministry of renewable energy and environment ministry all together submitted an affidavit, which is a government statement, which said that coal is a polluting source. We have committed to moving away from it. It kills people. It hinders our RE growth and all those things. And because of all those reasons, this RE project, which is said to be disturbing the habitat of Great Indian Bustard, should be cleared. And that's a statement where they say that if we don't go on the RE pathway, we have to go the coal pathway, and we don't want to, and we shouldn't, and we will not. So on one side, we are saying that we are moving away from coal. We don't need coal to stay. It's polluting. It's bad. On the other way, we say that that's available abundantly in India, and we have all the right to use it. Which I agree that whatever it is, whatever energy pathway we choose, one, it should be sufficient enough to meet our energy demands. And that's where I don't see a lot of role for coal if we go the RE pathway, which I clarified earlier. The second one is that it should not harm your own public, and coal clearly is one of the biggest contributor to air pollution in India, and leave the global story, leave the global citizens. It's harming our own community, so we owe it to them to provide them clean air, and that's why we shouldn't go with the coal in the first place. And then the larger climate change, larger pressure building globally also comes in. And on top of that, the only thing which was in favor of coal for the last few years was that it's cheaper than renewable energy. And that's also going away, and that has gone away in many cases, at least without storage, and even with storage in few years will be there. So there is no logic of expanding coal to such high capacities that these plants will be built, forests will be destroyed, communities will be displaced, and we won't use these plants. So it will be a huge loss for India as a nation, not just the loss in terms of forests or it's a huge economic loss as well, because like ecosystem services will be lost, people will suffer because of air pollution. The intensity of extreme events is increasing in India with every passing year. The heat waves right now are really becoming such a drastic uncertainties, and I'll say certainties, in a way that every year thousands of people die because of heat waves. Maybe even 100,000 or hundreds of thousands people die due to air pollution which stems from fossil fuels. We have finite resources to be invested in the energy sector, or anywhere for that matter, and if a larger chunk of that is still going to fossil fuels and to those projects which in future will not even be needed, that's a huge loss right now. And we know that there are ecosystem costs, human health cost as well associated with, and livelihood loss caused with fossil fuels. So there's a very clear pathway to choose. We are working on both, but I feel that the kind of diversion which we saw in 2023, where we saw more and more coal-based power plants coming up in the pipeline, most of them might not even take off because they are not needed. And I hope that it's just a pre-election boom in the coal capacity, and if RE keeps the pace up and increases the pace of installations, these coal pipelines will shrink automatically the way they did between 2014 to 2018.
I think earlier you mentioned, some externalities of using coal as a power source as well. And I think one thing that's really, very important for the Indian public is air pollution. And if you include the health costs of air pollution if you incorporated the health cost into the price of electricity coming from coal, it would be astronomical, in terms of just how much air pollution impacts, a city like New Delhi, for example, and what it does to every industry that's affected. I mean, you can even go down to schools; they get shut down. It affects everything. So when you do add in those costs, it becomes a bit of a you don't. It's difficult to understand why you would choose that over something that is abundantly available. For example, as you've been mentioning, renewables and the growth of renewables and the cost competitiveness of renewables coming online too. So it does make sense to choose that path. And I'm like you, I hope that India does choose that path. Whether or not we have these two different stories going on at the same time, it's an interesting mix to watch. But yeah, I share your concern about going down the wrong path, for example. And I think this also comes down to the money too. Like, all of these things cost money, and lots of it. And India over the past couple of years has been quite vocal about the need for outside help to help and support the country to transition properly away from coal. Like, if we are to go down this path that you've been mentioning of renewables over fossil fuels. And I think, Modi has been quoted by saying he needs $1 trillion for this. I think he was quoted saying that a couple of years ago at a COP, I think. But how do you see this playing out in terms of outside help coming into India to help the country transition? Do you think that this is possible given the global climate? I mean, by global climate, I mean, the appetite for investment to come into the country, given all of the other issues going on in other countries right now.
See, we definitely are in very difficult times when there is a lot going around us everywhere, and there are things which needs immediate attention and resourcing as well to bring peace and harmony. And even like, we can't get these people to where they were before this entire global disbalance kind of started, but it can help them be slightly better than where they are today. But that being said, the primary goal or why do we want to move away from coal has two sides. One is the global climate change, another one is the local air pollution. And that's where I feel that while the Indian government owes it to the Indian population to move away from coal because it impacts every individual's health, there is also a definite need for international financing and support to help India move, or not just India, all the developing countries and less developed countries, to move away from this polluting fuel of past. And the primary logic lies in the carbon budget, which has been used by different countries by using the fossil fuels. And because in your it's the trajectory which most of or all the growing economies have followed, where they consume more and more fossil fuels, grew economically, and used up the total available carbon budget. What I'm saying is, I'm not in favor of saying that India shouldn't do anything and India should continue on the path of burning coal or whatever. I say that while the EU or the US was using coal or other fossil fuels, maybe the renewable energy technologies weren't available the way they are today. And that's why we definitely have better pathways to choose. But that being said, the global financing and the global economic power and economic resources are still concentrated a lot in the EU and US, and those have come from fossil fuel revenues. And that's why these geographies owe it to the developing countries and least developed countries to help them with finances, with technology transfers, and mechanisms by which it can become relatively easier for these countries to move on that pathway. And it can if those finances are pulled in and are provided to the developing countries, the transition can be much faster. Otherwise, like it's basically like investments in the research and development and technology deployment, which is not going the way it should go because of lack of finances with these countries. But that being said, while the global West or the developed countries owe it to the developing countries to provide finances, I also say that while India accesses global finances for energy transition, it also should make rational and strategic decisions and usage of the finances available nationally. It cannot be that we keep working on both RE and coal pathway. We have to send very clear signals to the global community that, hey, we are ready to abandon coal, or we are ready to start making our transition away from coal, but you provide us finances, and the testament to our commitment is that our national finances are all directed in that direction. And that's where it has to be this combined approach of using any single dollar or rupee being available nationally or internationally, being utilized to move on that RE pathway and not on coal.
Would you say that would be your hope for the future, irrespective of which party wins the election?
So I'm definitely hopeful that in coming 5 years or 10 years, India is definitely going to do much better on RE than even it has done and received this global synonym of being a leader on RE. We will do much better on that, irrespective of whichever party comes to power. And that's primarily because coal is a fuel of past. It played a role in economic development, but it's hindering with the economic development right now. The estimates, like old estimates 5 years back, say that the air pollution causes at least 5% damage to India's GDP, and that's a huge cost. Why would we want to go on a pathway which has started causing our economic damage or loss? Whereas right now, I think yesterday there was a report by IEA which said that the global economies are driving much of their growth from renewable energy deployments and electric vehicle sales. And out of those economies, India, like out of EU, US, China, and India was the country with lowest share of clean energy technologies in their GDP at around 5%, whereas we have seen that to be 30% and 21% in China and EU for that matter. So it's in interest of the political parties to choose a pathway which saves billions of dollars, which saves public health, which puts them as the global leader. And I'm definitely sure that we'll walk on, or we'll move on that pathway. The only hope I would like to have, or only clarity I would like to see, is that our government, whichever party comes to power, chooses to walk on the pathway for future. And I'm not, when I say abandon walking on the pathway of coal, I'm not saying that you close down everything today and you don't provide electricity to everyone, and you don't maybe even grow your coal consumption for next few years. But what I definitely aspire that the next government should do is send out very clear signals that this is enough capacity to meet our power demands, and beyond that, we will not encourage or we will not support any new investments in coal. And if any private investor or any investor has any money, please invest it in renewable energy. That's the kind of clarity I hope for, which looks a bit tricky. RE pathway is more or less clear, but they both overlap, and if we keep working on both pathways, it will definitely hinder with RE growth, and we will again be in a situation where we will not be able to meet our 2030 targets because we are not working fast enough on that pathway if we keep investing on coal.
Well, Sunil, being mindful of time, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. And just before we sign off, are you able to tell listeners where they can maybe connect with you or follow you or maybe your organization's work?
Yeah, so as a group working on air pollution and energy, obviously do a lot of publications, and all the publications can be found on our website, which is energyandcleanair.org. We also put out our work and the tracking of energy and air pollution clients on Twitter and LinkedIn, where you can find us as CREA Clean Air with CREA Clean Air handle on Twitter. You can find me, or if there are any suggestions, any comments, or any information piece which anybody feels that I should be looking at, or you want to track what we've been doing in India and South Asia, you can track me on Twitter with Twitter handle Sunil_S_Dahiya. That's SUNIL_S_DAHIYA.
Awesome, Sunil. I'll put all that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. If you found this episode valuable, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share it with your friends or colleagues, and visit our website at energytracker.asia for more. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time on Energy Insights.